Hey everybody, I'm Spencer from Pixel and Bracket, and in this video, we are going to look at how to create Easter eggs in Adobe Illustrator. And if you like this video or find it useful, don't forget to hit that subscribe button down there. Somewhere down there. So let's go ahead and hop right into this. I'm done with the puns, I swear. Alright, so it's Easter season, or at least it was, or maybe it could be next year depending on when you're watching this video. So let's create some Easter eggs. We've got 3 designs here, but you guys can make up any design you want to based on some of the tools and concepts that we're going to use in this tutorial. First thing I want to do is grab some colors from these. If you want to follow along exactly, I'm going to create a few swatches here that I can pull some of these colors from. Okay, now I've got each of the colors that I'm using typed out over here for you guys to reference. These are the hex codes. So what you can do is just type this into the sort of the hashtag looking what do you call that, like pound symbol. This is where you type in the hex code, and you can just type in that code, and for me I'm just going to copy that, and it'll bring up that color if you hit enter. So now I've got that pink color. So if you want to follow along exactly, use the exact colors I have, here's all the codes written out for you right there to the side. And we're going to create the egg shape. So I'm going to select just a gray tone here. This egg is just the shape that we're creating. The actual color of the egg and stuff we'll be doing later. So I grabbed the ellipse tool from my toolbar over here, and I'm going to hold shift while creating a circle. That circle is then created out of 4 anchor points. What I want to do is select the direct selection tool, the second arrow down and up in your toolbar. I'm going to grab just that top point. You can either do that by clicking and dragging, or you can click on the circle and then click only the top point. And then I'm going to click and drag and hold shift to move that point up. That, you'll notice how that sort of elongates the top of the circle, and it allows me to sort of create an egg shape, and that's maybe a little bit too much. I'll bring that back down, hold shift to keep it all centered. I'll let it go right there. So it's a little hard to see on this sort of orange yellow background, so I'm gonna add a stroke to that of sort of a medium gray, and we'll make it 5 points. There you go. Now you can see we have this little egg shape. I'll make it a little bit bigger like my other eggs, and I'm going to drag that off to the side. So what I'm going to do now is actually create the pattern that I want to be on top of the egg. So I am going to create with the shape tool over here, the rectangle tool, a nice rectangle. You can just click and drag. You don't have to make it a square. You don't have to hold shift. Something that's going to cover up the entire egg. So I'm going to let go, and it's already got the, the same coloring that I had the egg at. So what I'm going to do now is, since I have this swatch, just use my eyedropper tool. I'm going to select this shape, hit I, click on my color swatch over here. Now if you want to add swatches to folders, for instance, if I wanted to add all 4 of these swatches to a group, kind of like the groups that I have here, all I have to do is select all of the objects that have the colors that I want, and then hit the folder icon, and that'll create a new color group. And I could call that group Easter Colors. And then it's going to create it from the selected artwork, and then I'll just hit OK, and now I have that group of artwork that I can go back and reference in different situations to color different things in my document. So I've got this background colored already. Now I'm going to want to add some little polka dots, and those are just as simply as we added the circle earlier. Select the ellipse tool, shortcut key L, and I'm going to go ahead and add 1 circle. I'm going to hold shift. I want those circles. Unless you want oval polka dots, I want circle polka dots, so I'm going to hold shift. It'll use whatever my last swatch color was. So I'm going to go ahead and change that to that white tone that we have here. It's sort of an off-white. The white creates a bit harsher of an effect, so I'm going to soften that a little bit by having it be like a 5 or 10% gray. Click that and then just drag it over here and duplicate this shape out a couple times. And honestly, I just want this to be a little bit haphazard, so I'm going to kind of just duplicate it wherever it lands. That's okay. We'll do 1 more down here. Now I'm going to duplicate 1 more of these, but with this guy, I'm going to actually click and hold shift and option or alt on a PC to scale it from the center. And it's scaling proportionately because I have shift held, so it's going to just make a smaller circle. I'm going to let go. Now I have a little circle there, and I'm going to sort of scatter these about in between the bigger circles. And once you have that sort of completed and everything feels kind of even, we can adjust this later, so you don't have to get it perfect. I'm just going to get a bunch of them on there. What I'm going to do is select this entire set so that I have all those shapes and objects selected. I'm going to hit Command G, and that will group them together. You can also right click and select group. Now that they're grouped, we can ungroup them, obviously, or do Shift Command G to ungroup them. Now that they're grouped together, I can actually grab any one of these objects and move them around, and they'll all move together. I'm going to take this egg shape that we have over here and bring it back, and notice how it landed behind my group. I'm going to bring that to the front. You can right click and arrange, bring to front, or you can use Shift Command right bracket to bring it to the front. So I'm going to position this right in the middle so that their polka dots and the background coloring all is going to cover that egg. I'm going to select both pieces of artwork, right click, and select Make Clipping Mask. What that did was it took the shape that was in the front and applied all of the background layers and objects that I had selected to the boundaries of that shape. So we have all these polka dots and the background color all within the egg shape now. It did lose the egg background color, the egg stroke color, but it used the whole shape as the clipping mask. So there's a couple things here that I don't like, the way that some of these are just barely peeking over the edge. So what I can do is with this clipping mask, and I can kind of click and drag it around, I can actually double click on it, and now I'm inside of the clipping group. Since these are grouped together, they'll all sort of move together. So what I can do is just right click, ungroup them. So now all my objects are gonna move as long as I don't have them selected. So I'm gonna click off of that group and then click back on. Now I can move these around independently of each other and sort of position them on my egg maybe a little bit better so they're not just barely off the edge. And I can move them away from each other, just kind of get a nice balance. I feel like there might be too many up here, so I'll just bring this one way off the edge, kind of center this one up, center this between those. I feel like these two guys are very sort of in line with each other a little bit too much, so I'm actually going to just delete one of them, and maybe bring this bigger polka dot back over closer, and then move this in the center. Kind of just adjusting these, moving them around, making sure they're not barely off the edge. You know, I like to be intentional with some of this stuff, so if I'm gonna have one off the edge, I'm gonna make sure it's like halfway off the edge so you can really see it. And that actually, I think that's got a pretty good balance to it overall. I see one down here, you see it, I'm gonna go ahead and zoom in on this guy, and this is what I mean by intentionality. See how it's just barely, you know, part of that graphic's just barely over the edge. I think you need to be intentional with it. Like, make it really look like I meant to have that cut off down there. Not just, you know, just a tiny sliver of it. That looks like an accident at that point. So now that I have these all lined up the way I want them and the background color's all right, I'm gonna double click off of this and we have an egg. Now obviously it's not completed yet. We don't have a shadow. We don't have the shadow below it. However, you do have graphics inside of an egg, and you can double click in there and sort of adjust things. So what we want to do next is actually create that shadow. So what I want is this egg shape to begin the shadow. So I'm going to double click into this, grab, like click on the edge here and to grab that clipping mask, and you can actually drag it around. It's almost like a window into the graphics behind it. Click on this edge and then hit Command C or Control C on a PC to copy. And then I'm going to double click out of this and hit Control V to paste. Now I have this sort of shape here. What I did was I just copied that clipping mask. So now I have the clipping mask, but on its own it's just a shape, but it has no stroke. So I can actually just add a stroke to this. I'm going to add this kind of highlighted red so you guys can see this. What we're going to do now is create the shadow that's on the outside of our egg. So I want to go ahead and position this over here and lock it into position. I can do that by simply clicking on the object and hitting Command 2 or Control 2 on a PC. And then now I can't move this, right? I can't move my egg. That's what I did to the background also, so I can't move the background. I'm going to drag this over the top of this egg shape. And now I'm going to actually give it a fill of black. What I want to do is select that egg, and remember it was made of 4 points, the same 4 points we had in the very beginning. I'm going to use the pen tool, which is over here in your toolbar. It's the fourth or fifth tool down. Select that, and I'm going to actually get rid of the anchor point on the left side of this. So now we're down to 3 anchor points, and they have their own handles set up on them with all these curves and such. So I'm actually going to adjust these angles. What I want to do is hold Option. Notice my pin cursor changes to what is sort of the anchor point tool. And I'm going to grab that handle and just drag it around until it's sort of pointing down to the lower right. It's basically pointing in the direction that it's sending that curve. But of course, then that curve is affected by the next point and that handle. So I'm going to grab that handle and also point it in this direction. And now you can see how I'm starting to develop the shadow on that side of the egg. And what I'm going to do is sort of just tweak these handles. The more I pull this out, the more influence that handle has on the curve. I'm going to kind of follow the edge of the egg a little bit here, but not completely, because in realistic 3D space, as this egg kind of rotates around, it actually will appear flatter and not as round. So I'm just going to kind of play with this a little bit and get it about right. Then I'm going to hit the V key to go back to my selection tool. That shadow looks pretty decent. What I want to do now is probably change this to more of a 50% gray shadow. Go over here to my appearance panel on the right side. If you don't see that, you can go to Window and then make sure Appearance is selected. And then that's going to pop out, and I actually, on this fill, I can change the opacity of it, change the blending mode of it to multiply. And that is going to create more of that shadow that shows through some of the bottom layers. And the reason I didn't just drop the opacity is because multiplying this gives it a bit different of an effect. It will retain some of the colors behind it better than if you just drop the opacity of it. I will, however, change this to maybe a lighter gray tone. So this is almost like a 20% black. Maybe we'll go to 30%. And we'll keep it there. So that's kind of creating a shadow. And I think we've sort of created a little bit more of a bend in this than the other one. So I can switch over to my direct selection tool, click on my shape, and then if I click on one of the points, it actually pulls up all of these handles again. So I don't need to be on the pin tool. I can be on the direct selection tool and adjust the handles. So I'm going to let these sort of bring that curve back around a little bit. That looks pretty close. We'll leave it there. And one thing you can do, little trick here, to pull some of the color of the background in, we can actually click on this shadow layer, use our eyedropper tool again with the I key, and then select the background. Now that obviously pulled in all of the properties of the background, so we're going to need to go to the appearance and click multiply again. But that's a little bit too drastic, so I'm going to change that color by double clicking on the fill in my color panel. I'm going to bring that left a little bit to retain some of the yellow, but not all of it. That way that shadow has a little bit relationship with the background color, while still being just a light gray tone. So we've got our shadow set up on this, and last but not least is the bottom shadow. We can actually just select our ellipse tool again, and this time I'm not going to hold shift. I actually want to create a little bit of an oval here for the bottom shadow. I don't want to go any larger than the egg itself, so we'll go almost to the width of the egg. Make this a bit of flat of an oval. That will give you a better result for the shadow. I'm going to let go, and then I'm actually going to eyedropper our shadow of our egg. Make sure that this is behind the egg by right-clicking, Arrange, Send to Back. And then we can just drag it up so that it looks like the egg is sitting on the ground there. And we've got our first one completed. On the next egg, we're going to learn the Warp tool, specifically the Bulge tool. So why don't we just copy this egg completely over, and then I'm going to go ahead and double click on it and get rid of some of these polka dots that we have here. And next thing we're going to do is actually change the color of the background. If I double click in there, it'll actually isolate that layer, so I have that rectangle. I'm going to go up here to our swatches we created earlier and select that blue color as my next background color. Now if I sort of double click outside of the rectangle, it'll take me outside of it all, and we now have a blue egg set up and ready for our lines. So to create those lines, we're going to go ahead and select the rectangle tool. I'm going to change from the blue color to a light gray color. Remember that 5 or 10% black, which would be a lot closer to white. It's a very light gray. And then what I need to do actually is use my selection tool, double click into that egg, and now grab my rectangle tool and just create some lines in the middle of this egg here. Create a few, and you'll notice how they are being clipped inside of that clipping mask, which is nice. That's what we want. You can kind of just create some different shapes and sizes, whatever you feel like looks best for what you're trying to do. There we go. So we've got a few lines set up. I'm gonna go ahead and expand this one up a little bit. Now I'm gonna click and hold shift on each one of these so that I can select every one of them. And I'm gonna go ahead and group that together. And it is important, and you can use Command G to group those together. Or like I've showed you before, you can do right click, group. It is important to have them all grouped together when you're doing the bulge warp tool or any kind of warp effect, because it's going to do the warp effect to all the objects at once rather than each object individually. So now that I have these all selected as a group, I'm going to go up to Effect and then Warp, and then I'm going to select Bulge. Go ahead and keep Preview selected so you can see what's happening out here to your document. I believe I'm going to change this to horizontal, and we're going to bring this way down and bring everything back to 0. These settings must have been saved from something else, so if you had settings saved from something else, just bring everything back to 0 to start with. Now we're going to see which way we want to bend this. We're actually not going to work or use this distortion down here, so make sure those are 0. And then just start to bend and see what this warp does to your shapes. Obviously so bending to the negative was not what we wanted, so I think we're going to want to bend positive to kind of give our eggs some dimension. And we don't want to do very much, maybe 5% for the size of document that this is. Go ahead and select OK, and we'll double click out of here and see what that did to our egg. It sort of rounds out all of its features, and with this shadow, it really helps you see the dimension of the egg. So let's move on to our last egg. I know this has gone on a little bit longer than I wanted to, but I hope you guys are learning a lot from it. And you can always skip ahead if you want. Anyway, on this last egg, so let's go in here and we're going to delete out this group. And then we're going to change the color. I'm going to double click into that to isolate it. We're going to change the color to our green that we have left over here. And once again, if you guys need all those color codes, they're right over here to the right. Just enter in those color codes to the hex area of your color panel, and you'll be able to use any of the same colors that I'm using. Now, we actually are bringing in another color here. It's going to be a darker green, but that's okay. I'll show you guys how to get that. So double click into your egg. Make sure you're not double clicking on the shadow, because if you double click on the shadow, it's just going to isolate the shadow, and then all you can do is affect that. So double click into the egg to make sure we're going into that clipping mask. And from this point, we can actually grab the pen tool, and I'm going to create a point, and I'm going to click and drag and point in the direction that I want my curve to go. So I'm going to click and drag down towards the egg so that my curve will start down that way. And I'm going to click on the other side of the egg, drag sort of, if this path were to continue on, it would go off to the left. So I'm going to drag to the left. I'm going to adjust this quite a bit and just kind of create a little curve here. So now I have this path set up. I'm going to hit V or just select my selection tool up here. And what we have here, the reason it looks so funky right now, I'm going to click off of it and you have sort of this weird shape going on, is because we created 2 points and this is a path, but what this path has attached to it is a fill and not a stroke. So what we're going to do is just get rid of that fill by selecting none. And I'm going to select the stroke, and we're just going to do that sort of grayish tone, kind of 5 or 10% gray again. And then I'm going to maybe do, 5 points on the stroke. We'll see what that looks like. So there you go. And let's go ahead and bump that up a little bit. I thought the last one wasn't very great, so we'll do 8 points on that stroke. And now I have a line that's sort of like bending and looping over my my egg here. So I'm going to duplicate this like a bunch of times. I'm going to hold Option and I'm going to click on the line on the path, hold Option, and then click and drag to move it around. And then what you can do is, you see this bounding box of the path, you can actually just hover over the corner until you get the double-ended arrow, and click and drag to affect the rotation of that object. That way I can vary the paths of each of these, and I can move them around. Just make sure that they completely cross your egg so that you don't have, you know, the end of the point landing on your egg somewhere, unless that's what you want. I'm gonna make sure they completely cross my egg. I'm gonna create a couple more here. Some of them, they're gonna sort of crisscross over. We'll add in one more way up here. I'm gonna rotate that some more. And then let's kind of look at that. I think we could use maybe one more right down here. It kind of comes in halfway on the side there and then drops way below. We'll kind of leave it at that. So right now these are all sort of white. What I'm going to do is grab one of these. I'm going to use the swatches panel getting up in the stroke, and I'm actually going to grab that same green background color. But then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to double click on that stroke over here in the color panel. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to retain the same sort of saturation with that, but I'm just going to go straight down so that it's a little bit darker of a color. I'm going to click in there and just hit OK on that. So now we have kind of this darker shade as well over the top of that green, but it's created from the same green background color, so it's kind of in that same color palette, like the same tones. And I'm going to just select a couple of these that I'm going to change to that color. And actually what I can do with that color right now, since I have it selected, I'm going to add that swatch in. I'm going to cancel that. I'm going to add it. If I click on this group here, I'm going to add the swatch to that, hit OK. And that way I just have that color handy whenever I need it. So for instance, if I want to change this guy to that same color, I can drop down my stroke and just change him to that color. And why don't we just go ahead and duplicate this and add one more in here, somewhere in here. And I'm actually going to take the direct selection tool, grab the top point of that path and just move it up a little bit so that it comes here. It kind of lands close to this other one. I can grab the handle and adjust that a little bit. And then I think we probably need one more down here. Maybe we'll just change the color of one of these. I'm going to use my selection tool instead. Change the color of this bottom one to that darker green. There we go. Now I don't like the way that these two greens are very parallel with each other. So what I'm going to do is actually just rotate this one and kind of change that a little bit. I'm going to bring him down here more and maybe up here, and then let him crisscross with this other green down here, so that you have some more crisscrossing happening. Actually, maybe I'll change this one back to white, and then drop these two down a little bit lower, somewhere in there. So what I'm doing is just sort of trying to balance this out, same way that we balanced out our polka dots over here. Just trying to balance out, you know, I might change the rotation of this white shape here, or this white path, and then shift click and grab both of these and sort of drag them down just a touch, just to kind of give this all more balanced feel. And I think what we're doing here is great. I think we're missing maybe one more of these guys down here towards the bottom, and we'll make sure he looks like he's looping a little bit more by grabbing this point, dragging him up, kind of crisscrossing that guy. We'll bump him up just a little bit more to make him look a little more intentional, and we'll leave it at that. So I'm going to double click out of this, and there you go. We've got another egg set up there. And I think that overall that 8 point on those paths was a little too much, so I'm going to double click into that. And what I'm going to do is just select all of this like we did before, and deselect the background, the egg, and we've got a little polka dot down here that we had left over, so I'm going to deselect him too. Now we have all the paths selected. I'm just going to drop these back down to 7, 6. We'll drop them down to 6. We'll leave it at that. I think that looks a little bit nicer. So you can obviously play with all of these elements and adjust them to your liking. I did this fairly quickly and kind of haphazardly, but that's how some of these come together. Like this one here should look a little bit random for it to kind of have that, have the right effect. But that's, in a nutshell, or in an eggshell. I'm sorry, I had to make one more pun. That's how you create these flat designed Easter eggs. I hope you guys gained some value out of this tutorial, enjoyed watching it. If you like my tutorials, like my videos, want to see more, check out my channel, Pixel and Bracket. Click the link down below, and subscribe if you'd like to stay up to date with all of our latest videos and live streams that I'm doing. Anyway, I hope you guys have a great holiday season, whether it's this year or next, and I'll see you guys later.